Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video I'm very excited for. It is also quite long overdue because friends, today I'm going to be doing a reading wrap up. I have 13 I want to say books to chat through today, which is quite a bit. It's about 2 months worth of reading. So honestly, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in because I have many titles to talk about, many of them perfect fall reads. A lot of my fall reading is in this wrap up, so let's get started. The first book I'm going to chat about is A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. This is T. Kingfisher's most recent release, and this is also one of my all-time favorite authors. T. Kingfisher just has a way with fairy tale retellings, combining beautiful writing, really lovable and like comforting characters with often a harrowing storyline. She balances like dark and light within her books really, really well. Her newest release is actually a retelling of the Brother Grimm's fairy tale, The Goose Girl, and we're introduced to our main character, Cordelia. Cordelia knows that her life at home is unusual. She knows that it's strange that she's not allowed to have any privacy, not even a door on her own bedroom. She knows that her expectations and having to manage her mother's moods is not something typical that other children have to deal with. The chores, the labor, the tasks, her mother's desire for her to have no friends is also quite unusual. The only peace that Cordelia tends to find is when she explores the forest outside of her home with her family's horse. However, though, after some events occurred within the town that Cordelia lives in, her and her mother are forced to flee in the night, and they basically find sanctuary at this like faraway estate. There, Cordelia realizes that she believes her mother kind of has a plot to take advantage of this family. Once they arrive at this house, we're also introduced to our other main character, Hester, who's kind of the older sister spinster of the lord that resides here. And the plot from there really begins to unfold. First and foremost, we follow Cordelia as she not only sort of begins to come into herself, gain confidence, but also begins to realize like what it means to be loved, what it means to be safe, what it means to be able to say no, not be fearful of everyday social interaction. We also begin to see Hester, this character, sort of spin up a plot to try to protect her own brother from this very dangerous woman and also kind of take Cordelia under her wing. This is a story that has elements of found family, but lots of mystery, lots of twists and turns. It does definitely has some darker plot elements, particularly surrounding family. Overall, I would say this book leans more whimsical and lighthearted than dark, but it definitely does stay true to the overall inspiration, is that Brothers Grimm's fairy tale. In general, I would say I was really entertained by this. It's not my favorite T. Kingfisher, but it's still one I would for sure recommend. Overall, I would give it like a 3.75 out of 5 stars. The next book I completed was actually my IRL book club pick, and that book is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. Liz Moore is an author I've read before and I've really enjoyed her writing. I feel like she combines really fantastic character work with like a thriller leaning plot that kind of keeps you hooked. And in particular, I would describe The God of the Woods as a genre mix of literary fiction and thriller. This is a book that's set in the 70s at this summer camp. Basically, there's this incredibly wealthy family that runs this camp. And at the beginning of the story, the unthinkable happens. A young girl is missing from her bunk. And this girl is not just any ordinary camper. She's actually the very wealthy daughter of the family that owns this camp. And 10 years prior to the start of this novel, their son also went missing at this camp. So kicks off not only an investigation to try to find this girl who has gone missing, but it also is this multi-POV story that encapsulates so many people from the town, legacy of this family, the history of this family, and sort of intertwining multiple mysteries at once. This is a story that is very much a thriller. There are multiple mysteries that are very eerie and chilling and will kind of get your heart racing that I really appreciated. But more than that, this is a story about society, the untouchableness of being wealthy, how much this town has sort of been taken advantage of by this one family. In it, we are following, again, a slew of different characters, which I also really appreciated. We're reading from the perspective of a young camper who is really close to the missing girl, a camp counselor who is a young woman who is a townie, a variety of characters that are connected to the family, from the mother to other people who work on the estate. This is a story that really twists and turns and sort of pulls you in so many different directions and really paints a very fascinating tapestry. I was both interested in just the everyday workings of all of these characters' lives and sort of rooting for them and rooting against some characters as well, while also just like very curious as to what actually happened within the book itself. I personally was caught by surprise with many of the different reveals. I was definitely uncomfortable at different parts of this book as I was like anticipating bad things happening. I feel like Liz Moore created a very windy, unputdownable book that was definitely like a thriller story, but also had a fantastic writing style with really compelling characters. I feel like Thriller mixed with other genres is one of my favorite things. I tend to not have great success with just thrillers by themselves, but when they are also something else, I tend to really enjoy them, and that was definitely the case with this book, and I would give this like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It hooked me. The next book I completed was Inkblood SisterScribe by Emma Torres. I was really looking forward to picking this up. This was a really popular book last year, and just in general, reading over the synopsis, it felt like a perfect fall read. This is a story about a family who has a lot of magical books, and also two estranged half-sisters who haven't spoken in many, many years. And due to a variety of situations, they basically have to come crashing into each other's lives to protect the family library of magical books, especially after the unexpected passing of their father. Before I read this book, I thought this was going to be a much more like slower paced, magical library, witchy style story about like family dynamics. And family dynamics are definitely center stage in this book, but it's also much more of a thriller and like a fast-paced book than I was actually expecting when I picked this book up. Basically, right away, you're sort of thrown into some very stressful and serious situations. We're first following one sister who is stationed in Antarctica, and she basically is under the impression that someone is after her. She's basically had to move every single year of her life for a very long time to prevent being found. She doesn't know why she has to move, but she does know someone is chasing her, and she's beginning to believe that is happening once again in this remote location. So she's trying to like become safe and leave. We're also following our other main character who's living in Vermont at the family property, and she is basically taking care of these various magical books. After the unexpected passing of her father at home, there's just been a lot of questions and unexpected things happening around town. There's just like a lot of conspiracy at play that's established very, very quickly in the story. There's also a third main character who is a young man who's a part of this like very wealthy family, also connected to these magical books, if you will. And there's just a lot of like mysteries and secrets that begin to unfurl, unexpected connections. There is an element of family, but I would just say in general, this was like a much quicker paced novel than I was anticipating, and all the twists and turns were pretty interesting. I will say overall, this is a book that's definitely more focused on plot than character development. I appreciated the sisterly connection, and there was definitely some space and time given to some of the romantic connections and just the character arcs to this story, but the primary concern of this book is the plot itself, which was pretty entertaining. I do feel like this could have been better, but it was good, and overall I would still recommend it, and I would give it like a 3.75 out of 5 stars. The next two books I'm going to chat about are part of the same series. That is first Tiamat's Wrath, and also Leviathan Falls by James S.A. Corey. This is books 8 and 9 of the Expanse series, the final two books in this very long epic space opera series that I have been reading now for many, many years. Can't believe I finally finished this, and I'm also happy to report that I was really pleased by the end of this entire series. In fact, there's like an end arc that exists within the last 3 or 4 books that I was not expecting or anticipating at all, but found to be super captivating, which like really caught me by surprise in general, especially for just how long this series is. If you're not familiar, the Expanse series is a very long, action-packed like sci-fi series centering a huge cast of characters and so much action. It's basically set in the near future with humanity having gone beyond like the reaches of Earth, and now there are governments and settlements and civilizations on the moon, Mars, and a series of space stations called the Belt. All of these places are very much at odds with each other. Just in general, there's a lot of societal distrust and a lot of economic situations where different people and many people are being taken advantage of. In the beginning of book 1, we're introduced to our main character James Holden, who is a ship captain. He has a whole crew who you definitely meet and fall in love with over the course of this series. They stumble upon a piece of ancient alien technology, and things begin to completely fall apart from there. This series covers so much stuff. There's so much action. There's so much development in the plot. Honestly, just like how the authors were able to keep this series fresh and introduce new and different stakes over the length of this series, I thought was so impressive. I was always captivated. I also felt like their character work got better and better and better throughout the series. They do a really good job of sort of zooming in and out on different situations. We have sort of macro plot lines that carry over book over book over book, but then we follow sometimes specific situational characters that are specific to 1 or 2 books and their character arc, which is sort of symptomatic of like what's going on within the universe at large. I just feel like the authors do such a good job rooting the story within humanity. And yes, we're having these massive like intergalactic battles happening at times, but we're always rooted in like the core of it, which is like the human experience, the desire for people to be safe, loved, understood, to have justice, to have freedom. Like all of these things are like consistent themes throughout this series, and I felt like it was just handled so well. Some of the last books in this series were actually my favorite, as I felt like it became even more introspective and reflective on like these specific themes. I will say the last one, which is just a symptom of like really long series, I really enjoyed, but I guess relative to the other books I've read recently was maybe slightly less good, but it was still amazing. I would probably give the last book in this series 4 stars, the 8th book in this series 5 stars. I truly cannot communicate more like how this series will constantly blow your mind, shock you, will also make you think and appreciate the character arcs and the development that you have on the page. I loved all the different relationships built slowly over the course of this long series. I just felt so deeply connected to the major cast of characters, but also all the side characters too, and just the amount of time literally that takes place over the course of all this was really well done as well. I just really appreciated this. James S.A. Corey is definitely one of my favorite authors. I'll be reading more of their series for sure in the future. I just really enjoyed the Expanse series so much, and I can see why it's so popular, and I'm so proud of myself for finally wrapping this up. The next book I was able to complete was Red Country by Joe Abercrombie. This is the third and final standalone that Joe Abercrombie has released between his 2 major series, and this was his like interpretation of a Wild West tale. It's a journey story, it's a quest story, it's full of gray morality, really unexpected plot lines, and some fantastic character cameos, which you tend to have in these standalone books and stories. Something I've really appreciated about his standalone works is that they exist within his universe. So they're informed by the politics of everything that has come before the start of these novels, definitely. And especially when we have certain cameos, like they exist as a consequence of all of their previous decisions that we have run into in either a small or a large way. But I feel like because these standalone stories can be more focused and the plot that they're trying to express, Joe Abercrombie's writing and his characters can really shine. This setup and story is pretty straightforward. Basically following our main character who at the beginning of the story, their farm is attacked. Her farm is destroyed and her younger siblings are stolen to be traded off. So she and her stepfather basically begin to traverse this vast landscape to try to get them back. And along the way, they make enemies, more people join their crew to try to save these children. So much of the story is exploring the idea of second chances and also being able to like turn your life around no matter how many bad decisions you've made up until this point. Also the slippery slope of collective violence, how individual morality can be sucked up by like collective amorality, and how much willpower it can take to sometimes make a stand and choose what you feel like is right for yourself. And that is sort of happening in a broad stroke. And once you know the characters that are sort of in play within this book in particular, it is especially interesting and very dark. So much of this book is a contemplation on all of those specific topics. And yes, there is a plot. There is an adventure and so many things that these characters have to overcome, so many new places that they discover, so many obstacles that are difficult and dark and bloody and confusing as well that will keep you flipping the pages. But I just feel like these standalones have been such a unique expression of Joe Abercrombie's talent and character writing, and because all of his characters are sort of amoral or very complex and nuanced, you never quite know like what exactly is going to happen, but you're rooting for them to make better decisions for themselves because you do like them even when they are making like bad choices. But yes, all that to say is I feel like the Wild West vibe really worked in this. It's honestly a tie between Red Country and The Heroes, which I read recently and loved as well. As to which one is my favorite, I still don't know, but I would give this 5 stars. From there, I was craving like a fun YA fall read, so I decided to pick up Belladonna by Adeline Grace, and this is like a gothic horror murder mystery story, and it basically follows our main character who was orphaned as a baby. Ever since then, she's been sort of passed around from guardian to guardian to guardian, and she's also been considered cursed, so a lot of her guardians have passed away unexpectedly. She's also had this connection with death her entire life, meaning that she can see death, and she herself is also immortal, like she constantly evades death. At the beginning of the story, Signa is very close to inheriting her large fortune that her family left for her, but she's now staying with like one final guardian, and this family is called the Hawthorns, and they live in this very faraway estate. Before her arrival there, some very unexpected events occurred. First, the wife and mother of this family passed away unexpectedly, and everyone is sort of grieving and processing this loss in a different way. The father is throwing these dramatic, over-the-top parties. Daughter herself is sick, seemingly with the same illness that took the mother, and the son is determined to regain the reputation of this family. And when our main character arrives on this estate, she begins to be haunted by the ghost of this woman, and she tells her that she's actually been murdered. And now it's up to our main character to figure out what in the world is going on, hopefully save this family from ruin. This is like a really fun, campy, sort of murder mystery of the week style story. We follow our main character who's very endearing, very likable, very moral, and these sort of classically gothic setting. We have a haunted house. We have unknown illnesses sort of sweeping through family members. We have these strange, beautiful, glittering parties. We have a main character who's also death himself, who's constantly sort of surrounding our other main character, and the push and pull of those sort of interactions, which are quite fun. We have a mysterious stable boy that our main character works with to try to solve this mystery too. It's just like full of a lot of classic tropes that I actually feel like, while expected, were done quite well in a very entertaining fashion. It delivered exactly what I was hoping it was going to deliver in terms of a story, in terms of the pacing, in terms of the plotting. For that, I can't really fault it. Like, was it the most mind-boggling thing I've ever read? No. Was it the most atmospheric thing I've ever read? No. But did I have fun reading it? Yes. And if you like YA murder mystery stories with a little bit of romance, a little bit of drama and tension, but nothing like too serious, I do recommend picking this book up. And honestly, I would give it like a 3.75 stars. It was a lot of fun. In that same vein, I was still craving some more YA, so I decided to pick up The Box in the Woods by Maureen Johnson. This is a standalone novel within the Truly Devious universe by this author. So obviously there is that first trilogy following our main character Stevie as she's at this very prestigious academy trying to solve a cold case at this school over the course of 3 books. This book, we find Stevie during her summer vacation, and she's basically approached by this guy who recently bought a summer camp. And at this summer camp, many, many years prior, there was this murder called the Box in the Woods murders, where a group of young people were murdered in the woods in the 70s at this camp. That's right, I did read 2 like summer camp murder mystery novels, like pretty back to each other. And I would say if you like one, you would probably like the other, but The God in the Woods is like a better book than this, but this was still like quite campy and cute. But in it, again, we're following our main character Stevie, who dreams of being an FBI agent. She has a very good talent of getting in trouble and solving mysteries. Beginning of the story, she's basically at this summer camp and a couple of her friends come with her, and she's working with this like tech bro who wants to start this podcast by trying to solve this mystery. And obviously this crime, which happened in the 70s, is still very much like an open wound within this small town community that's attached to this camp. But over the course of the story, we're again experiencing a dual timeline of both what happened in the 70s and then obviously following Stevie present day as she's trying to solve this mystery, and also being in danger herself as things from the past begin to creep into the present, as you would expect. Overall, I found this book to be very endearing, fun. I liked the twists and turns of the story. I will say, for the first time for a Maureen Johnson book, I guessed some of the reveals, and I also felt some of the other stuff I couldn't guess. It would have been like impossible to guess. There was some definite out of left field stuff occurring in this one. I would say of the Maureen Johnson books I've read, which now are 5, this is my least favorite, but I still had a lot of fun reading it, and it was a quick read, and it was definitely entertaining, and would recommend, especially if you like Maureen Johnson, but I would give this like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next up, I have a very cozy and endearing read, so if you're looking for like a palate cleanser fantasy novel, this is the book for you, and that is The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst, a cozy fantasy newer release that was pretty delightful, and it follows our main character Kiela, who is very much an introvert, and she has been working within this massive library for most of her adult life. She eats, sleeps, works here. She doesn't really interact with many other humans. She's very focused and devoted to the books in this place. However, though, when revolution rocks the city, she's forced to flee, and she takes with her as many books that she can carry, as well as her like a live plant assistant who is very funny and very opinionated, and she decides to go back to her hometown, which she has not been back to in many, many years, and take up residence in her family's old home. She arrives on this island that is magical with her magical books and her talking plant, and first things first, she has to get her house in order, which she is attempting to do when she meets her very nosy, very handsome neighbor who's very outgoing and begins chatting with her, and he doesn't realize that she's actually an introvert. She doesn't want to chat with anyone. So obviously there's quite an adorable back and and forth here, but this story is really like following our main character, Kiela, as she gets settled back into this small town, set up her residence, clean, prepare it, and also get involved in some industry on this place. She begins to make jam, which is delicious and really endearing to read. Like, aspects of this book honestly read like a farm sim. It's just really relaxing. There are definite like larger plot points at play too. We have a little bit of a romance, a little bit of small town drama, and also some stuff regarding hidden magic. But I would say at no point are the stakes of the story like ever so high you're really too stressed, which for me is like the perfect level I'm looking for when reading cozy fantasy. Cute characters, endearing storylines, humor, romance, love, friendship, camaraderie, a delightful island I wish I could visit in real life. You know what I mean? It was just like a really cozy, cute time and delivered exactly what I was hoping it would, and I would give this like a 4 out of 5 stars. Next 2 books I completed, I'm so happy that I was able to catch up on or finish some series I've been reading now for a while. First is Amari and the Despicable Wonders by B.B. Alston. This is the 3rd book to the Amari series, which is a very fun middle grade series that I've truly really enjoyed every single installment. This 3rd book actually just came out, and if you haven't checked out this series, I highly recommend you do so, especially if you love middle grade fantasy. But in this series, we're introduced to our main character Amari, and Amari has never stopped believing that her older brother Quentin is still alive. So when she finds a ticking briefcase in his closet with an invitation for her to join the Bureau of Supernatural Affairs, she's honestly not too surprised. But turns out magic, magical beings, supernatural creatures are all real, and there's actually this bureau that's responsible for sort of regulating magic and also protecting normal humanity from magic users, and also keeping magic users safe from normal humanity. You get the idea. So alongside these like government jobs, there's also an academy that students can enroll in to get better control of their own magic and also become agents working in the bureau itself. Amari has dreams of becoming kind of this like head agent so she can go out and try to find out what happened to her brother. And along the way, she's pulled into all sorts of mayhem and mischief. She makes friends, she makes enemies, she uncovers so many despicable plots that are sort of rooted within this bureau itself. Every installment is honestly full of so many twists and turns, really, really clever, like magical elements, which I always appreciated. But the entire book and series is really rooted in our main character, Amari, who's just so adorable and rootable and brave and charismatic and just like a perfect middle grade heroine you will just love. I just always really appreciate reading what Amari and her friends are up to, seeing her have to take on all different types of obstacles and challenges to save the day. It's just like a really fun middle grade series that I also feel like is really clever as well. Highly recommended, always really enjoy it. So I was so excited that the 3rd book finally came out. Another series I'm happy to report I finally finished, the Tiamats series by Naomi Novik. I finally read the 3rd and final book, which is the Golden Enclaves. I read the first 2 books last fall, absolutely loved them, and classically held off reading the final installment because I didn't want it to end. But if you're not familiar, this is a magic school centered story, and it's basically set in a world where magic exists. And alongside magic users, there's also monsters that target magic users, and they're super dangerous. And the most dangerous time in any sort of magician's life is actually when they're a child and they don't have full control over their magic yet to protect themselves. A solution to this was basically a bunch of powerful magicians all around the world created something called the Tiamats, which is a magic school they can send their kids to basically get an education. It's a self-sustaining, self-run school by like magical entities, and the children live like separately from the world in this alternate dimension. And while it is technically safer than existing in like the normal world, it's still by no means safe. Monsters roam the halls, going to the bathroom is unsafe, going to class is unsafe, resulting in students making like alliances with one another. Privilege and connection and wealth and like magical hierarchy is also very much at play within this school. And in it, we're following our main character, Elle, who she herself is like super powerful, but her magic actually wants her to be evil. And she's also like a self-prescribed loner. She's not interested in like sucking up to anyone to make a deal or make a connection. She's fine sort of living a solo existence and just trying to survive day by day. However, though, over the course of the series, we watch her begrudgingly make friends and sort of turn the hierarchy of the Tiamats on its head. I really loved the first 2 installments so much. Not only was the plot like intricate and interesting, the magic system, how the school worked, but also like the character connection connections and the friendships that were developed too. Going into the third installment, there was quite a huge cliffhanger at the end of book 2, so I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen. I appreciated a lot of this book. I really liked the focus on Elle, her emotions, and sort of the journey she experienced with that. I also loved that we got a lot more information on how the different magical societies and communities worked around the world, and the sort of politics of those and how those bled back into the Schoolomance in particular. I felt some character decisions were like a little weird in this one, and I think if you've read it, you maybe know what I'm talking about, but in general, I still feel like it was a pretty faithful and solid third book and final installment within this world and series, and it's still definitely a series I highly recommend. I just feel like the magic and the world are so fascinating, and I really appreciate the writing style. It's very like stream of consciousness, and Elle as a main character is so funny and forward, and I appreciate her as kind of the center of the story. I just feel like the whole thing was such an excellent experience, and I gave this final book like 3.75 4 stars. The next book I read was one of my most anticipated releases of the fall, and that is Lady Macbeth by Ava Reid. This is Ava Reid's like dark, feminist reimagining of Macbeth, centering Lady Macbeth in the story itself. In this story, we're following our main character, Rusilla, and she is a young lady who has just been married off after an agreement was made between her father and a faraway lord named Macbeth. She now finds herself in a strange, dark, desolate land, very far from home. The landscape is cold and brutal. The castle she finds herself in is very, very dangerous, not only from a politics point of view, but there are really like no other women around, and war is very much center stage. Her new husband is much older than her, very violent, war-centric, and also has aims and political designs himself. And she feels very strongly that she has to do anything within her power to protect herself. Scylla herself is also deemed as like someone who is witch touched. She is exceptionally beautiful, and they say that her eyes drive men mad, and this is because she was touched by a witch. She tries to protect herself from her association with magic as best she can. She also tries to use it as a weapon against others to protect herself too, but she quickly realizes that her husband also has his own source of power, and things from there get complicated very, very quickly. I would say this book is like very vibe centric. First and foremost, the writing style is stunning and really captures the setting, and I feel like the overall ambiance of this story, like it's chilly, like literally chilly. I feel like the cold seeped into my bones. This austere place that our main character finds herself in was grim, dark, on the edge of the ocean, and just like brutal in nature, and I feel like that stayed consistent all the way through. I also appreciated sort of being centered in Lady Macbeth's experience, her determination to try to protect herself, the sort of overwhelming feeling of not knowing quite what to do at any point in time, and how most of her decisions were actually very impulsive, sometimes thought through, and it just felt much more vulnerable and emotionally focused than I feel like you would get in like the traditional story of Macbeth. I also appreciated some of the changes that were made for this story, and especially in regards to certain character connections. I just felt like this book was like the perfect mix of weird and beautifully written for me. I didn't mind that some of the characterizations were a bit shallow for the side characters. I was like happy to buy that and enjoy it how it was, because I was kind of in it for the vibes, if you know what I mean. And just in general, I would say I was pretty entertained by this book. I read it very quickly. I was captured by it, captivated by it, you might say, and I would definitely recommend this. I gave it like a 4 out of 5 stars. And the last book I was able to complete for this wrap-up was An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson. This is Alexis Henderson's horror dark academia new release, centering a university campus for students who participate in mind control. In it, we're introduced to our main character, Lennon, who at the beginning of the story is going through a difficult time. She's struggling with a marriage that she doesn't want to go through with. She's also struggling with her mental health, and we kind of find her at the beginning of this book at rock bottom, and that's when she receives a phone call letting her know that she's actually been admitted into this university, and she's never heard of it before, and she doesn't know why she was admitted, but turns out it's because she's one of the few people in the world who has the ability to have like mind control powers. From there, we begin to follow her as she attends classes, like learns to harness her powers more, and begin to kind of follow this path of becoming obsessed with her own abilities. She also gets wrapped up with another figure named Dante, who's very mysterious. He's also her academic advisor, and things get complicated there very, very quickly. The university is full of mystery in terms of like what their actual motivations are. There's lots of academic rivalries and flimsy friendships, as you would also expect in a dark academia story. And in general, I would say I was pretty entertained reading this book. I will say I feel like the first 25% was incredibly strong. Eeriness of the overall narrative. I also felt like the author utilized body horror quite well. I will say after that 25% mark, aspects of the horror elements of this I sort of feel like fell to the wayside, and there was a more focus on sort of the everyday academic reality of our main character Lennon. I would also say some of the plotting was a little bit flimsy, especially going into the second half, and just in general I wish there was more focus on world building, of not only explaining how the magic worked, but also this sort of magical university and kind of seeing more of the secrets behind the scenes of how it operates. All that being said though, I'll be honest and say like I can recognize how this book was imperfect and how I wish it could have been better. But wholeheartedly, I was also super entertained while reading this book. I found it really hard to put down. I really liked Lennon. I liked how unpredictable she was. I liked how flawed she was as a main character. I also found the sort of toxic relationship that she had with Dante to just be like super entertaining. Like I know I shouldn't have found it as entertaining as I did, but honestly, Alexis Henderson like kind of delivered on that part. I feel like there was definitely strengths and weaknesses to this, but I feel like if it works for you, I feel like it will. I also can understand how some people might not have been as taken with this book, especially because I do feel like it could have been better, but I won't deny that I couldn't put it down. So with that in mind, I'd give it like a 3.75 out of 5 stars. Alrighty guys, that is my very large reading wrap up. Thank you if you ended up making it to the end, and I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye.